All right, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce the speaker for our next research-based talk entitled The Elephant in the Room, Intimate Partner Violence, Women, and Traumatic Brain Injury in Africa South of the Sahara. So Dr. Martina Anto-Ocrah is an assistant professor of medicine and epidemiology whose research centers on pregnancy, sexual and reproductive health epidemiology in the United States and global populations. As a reproductive epidemiologist, Dr. Anto-Ocrah's US-based work explores the impact of traumatic brain injuries on women's reproductive well-being, so pregnancy, sexuality, menstruation, sociocultural norms, while her global health work is focused on obstetric emergencies and the 3 delays. Though a quantitative methodologist, Dr. Anto-Ocrah has a deep appreciation for mixed methods research and often involves qualitative research methodologies and machine learning approaches in her work. And in her spare time, Martina enjoys humorously blogging about parenting a 12-year-old singleton and his 9-year-old triplet siblings. And she appeared on the 2018 holiday season of the Netflix hit baking show Nailed. So with that, we'll turn it over to Dr. Anto-Ocrah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. Can you all hear me okay? So interface is a little bit different from perfect. I'm gonna share my screen and pull up my slides here. Okay, perfect. I'm trying to navigate here. Okay. I want to scroll to the bottom and make it a full screen, but for some reason, okay, I got it. Perfect. Everyone can see my screen all right? Awesome. Please let me know if you can't in the chat. But first and foremost, I'd like to thank the conference organizers for considering to include me and also to explore this topic in a context that is what is considered a low to middle income setting or a low resource setting. We do know that individuals who come from sort of vulnerable background or are marginalized tend to experience intimate partner violence just as much as those who may come from a non-marginalized background. But actually they may, a lot of IPV in the non-US context is actually driven by economics and poverty. And so I'm really excited to be presenting to you today. I have to say, I presented this at the 2022 conference of the African Conference for Emergency Medicine. And at the time, I had just come across ENIGMA. I did not know too much about the organization. And what's interesting is I included ENIGMA in my talk and also in the manuscript that was published. And it's really wonderful to fast forward now 2 years later and presenting it to a US audience when I had already presented to the African audience. So this is incredibly exciting. So I am faculty at the University of Pittsburgh, and I am in the Department of General Internal Medicine as well as epidemiology. I'm a reproductive epidemiologist, and really my call to doing TBI research and concussion research is really driven from a feminist perspective, because I fight for the girl child, I fight for the woman, and I fight so that the woman can get the resources that she needs as a mom myself with 3 children who play ice hockey. My girls also play ice hockey. My son plays ice hockey. My son has sustained a concussion that was pretty severe and gets reignited every time he's on a roller coaster. And my youngest, one of my triplets, son plays soccer. And so we are being exposed to concussion. And also we live in Pittsburgh, right? A sports city. So more than likely, we're going to encounter this everywhere. So here we go. Let's scroll down to the next slide. All right. So I have no disclosures. You're more than welcome to scan this QR code if you'd like, so you can really read the article. What I love to do is I love to tell the story of my research so that it's not over anyone's head. And so the goal of today is to really to simplify and tell you the story of this research that we did. I look forward to your feedback. So I'm going to first begin by playing this tune, which you may not be familiar with, but what I want you to do is I want you to really think about the emotion, like how evocative the tune is. And if you recognize the singer, let me know, because I would love to know. Just put in the chat. So I'm gonna play now.
Martina, I'm sorry, we're not hearing the audio.
You are not hearing the audio. Let
No.
me, how do I fix that? Can
When
I?
you
Go ahead.
when you share, there's a
Mhm.
little button at the bottom that says share audio too. I forgot to click it this morning as well, so that's why I know.
So I am sharing now. So what I need to do is go to the audio and do.
Actually, if you could unshare for a moment
Okay, stop
and
share.
then reshare. So when you click reshare, there should
Mhm.
be a little button at the bottom that says share audio as well.
Option. Perfect. All right, let's do this
Thank
again.
you.
Let's do this again. I just play a little bit.
The cry you will cry when the saints have gone.
Can you hear it now, okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, awesome. All right, I'm gonna play it one more time.
Cry it now while the saints are still around. The shout you will shout when you heard that the saints have gone. Shout it now while the saints are still around.
So I'm gonna pause that. Is anyone, first and foremost, familiar with the singer? Have you ever heard of the singer by any chance? Okay. Let me see if there's anything in the chat. Perfect. All right. So I'm not surprised that you have not heard of the singer. So there's a very popular song and a very popular musician. Her name is Osinachi Nwachukwu. She's a Nigerian pastor. And I'm going to rephrase that and say she was a Nigerian pastor because she passed away from domestic violence and was murdered actually by her pastor husband. Right? So for years, she had been standing on stage and singing. And why I wanted you to pay attention to the evocation, to the emotion that's being expressed is the depth of it, right? So she's in an environment where she can't really talk about what she's going through because she's a pastor and she's married to a pastor who's highly revered. But for years, she had been enduring domestic violence at his hands. And then she died. So this is one of the very last songs that she sang on stage, basically asking, right, to the God that she believes in for deliverance. Oh my goodness, let me turn off all my notifications. All right, let me go back to the PowerPoint. All right, can you all see my PowerPoints now, okay?
No, we're still in the video player.
All right. I love it. Technology is going to be the death of all of us. But... All right, so now you can see my slides, okay?
Yes, you're great. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. So like I said, she was the very renowned Nigerian gospel singer. She actually passed on Friday, April 8th, 2022. And right before I did this talk, and I remember just being completely moved, and I just thought, how timely, right? And I decided then to use her story to be the platform to share the paper that we had just published. So like I mentioned, she had passed from domestic violence perpetrated by her pastor husband. And IPV has been defined throughout this conference, so I'm not going to belabor it. But what happened after her passing was that then social media blew up, right? Social media blew up across the African continent, and I was in an all-women's group in Ghana, where I'm from, and literally every single day they were posting, this is an all-women's group, share if you're feeling helpless, similar to Pink Concussion, where women gather to provide support for each other. They were literally calling on women to come move forward and share. Another very brave woman then also came forward from the Zambia and then said, I'm calling off my wedding because I have been married to this man for so long, and actually posted a picture of her and her partner to say, I'm no longer going to marry you because you've been abusing me for many years, right? So this really prompted debates about norms and expectations of women in highly normed environments. And basically, just because I, as a woman, choose to marry someone, does it mean that I have to endure the abuse? And I want to stop here and say that just because I'm talking about women does not mean that men also do not experience intimate partner violence. Men do as well. But in this context, in the African context, really, the people who tend to experience IPV for the most part tend to be women. And we're talking about this particular case. So speaking of that, I'm going to define two very important terms. So biological sex, female, male, basically means the biology in which I present myself. I have a uterus. Therefore, in the Ghanaian context, I'm expected to bring forth child. Those are the expectations that are placed on me just because I have the parts, right? However, gender is the norms, and the norms that are placed on me simply because I present the parts. So I have the parts, therefore the gender expectation therefore means that I'm supposed to be able to bring forth child. But the two are sometimes used interchangeably, but one is societally determined and one is physiologically, anatomically determined, right? And so there's been a surge in looking at the sex and gender predictors of neuroscience, neurocognitive outcomes, especially by the NIH. And I really, as a reproductive epidemiologist, stand on my soapbox is that gender is a social determinant of health. And there's been a lot of research that has been focused on women because population level data shows that on aggregate, women suffer from negative health consequences due to the inequalities between the sexes that men do. And also men and women have different norms that are placed on them. And amongst those are IPV and TBI. We've talked about TBI, we've talked about IPV, and our paper then went to intersect the two. So as my colleagues previously mentioned, the data from the WHO actually states that 1 in 3 women experience violence at the hands of a partner. But as we know, that may be underreported because our previous speaker mentioned that in Canada, up to 44%, so almost 1 in 2 women actually report in a high resource setting, right? Let that sink in for a second. In a high resource setting, Canada, if 44% of women, that is almost 1 in 2 women, experience IPV at the hands of a partner, imagine in this setting where IPV is determined by poverty in a low resource setting, how much higher it may be. So we can even say that this number here is an underestimate, right? So we did a scoping review to basically understand what is the intersection between IPV and TBI in the Sub-Saharan African context. Africa south of the Saharan context, because we see a lot of research on IPV, we see a lot of research on TBI, but rarely are those two combined, and especially in the African context where there are a lot of gender norms placed on women. So we did a whole literature search, we searched all these databases that are available to us, and we searched for papers between the years 2010 and 2021 that were focused on the intersection between IPV and TBI. We pulled up about almost 6,000 papers, excluded a substantial number that had nothing to do with the topic, and ended up with only 10, which is commendable, but really, really low. So 10 papers only had actually explored the intersection of IPV and TBI. So and the papers were mostly focused on female populations. In South Africa, there were about 5. In Ghana, there were 3. In Uganda, there was 1. And in Cameroon, there was 1. The awesome thing was that there was a mixture of different methodologies that were used. So there were qualitative studies, biomarker studies, which is really exciting, some case studies or case reports, and there was only 1 quantitative study, as well as only 1 mixed method. So we're going to walk through those. So out of the 6 out of the 10, discussed some of the IPV symptomatology that we have discussed. So headaches, sleep disruptions, and ophthalmic injuries. 3 actually went into depth and discussed the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, so biomarker MRI, which really adds a lot of rigor to the subjective reporting. And then an N of 1 actually looked at forensic anthropology, took a forensic anthropology lens, and was an autopsy study. Now, if we get to autopsy study, I frankly believe that we have done the subjects an injustice. We have done ourselves an injustice, and we have not done well as researchers or scientists. Because we're doing an autopsy, yes, we can speak to the issue, but I think mortality is not what we're aiming for. So we should definitely sort of, these 9 studies are sort of what we want to use to really send a message. And this 1 study is what maybe the sprinkling on the cupcake, but we don't want these 9 studies then to progress to be mortality studies, because that is a gross injustice to those who suffer from IPV. So the qualitative studies were mostly explicit. You're able to sort of interview individuals and get verbatims and their statements regarding what they're experiencing. So in this one participant said, my partner slapped me one night and for 1 week, my eyes turned to red. I had to remain indoors for some days because I had blood clots on my eyes after my husband had beaten me. I suffered injuries in my face with my eyes being the most affected. This individual had to remain indoors, couldn't go outdoors to talk about it, right? Had no outlet, just had to basically wait for the blood clots to dissolve. The objective assessments, one was from Cameroon, and actually this one is really powerful because it actually reports on data from an organization called the Association for the Fight Against Domestic Violence. For you, that such an organization in the African context is a power move, right? That is a move of, I am here and I am going to talk about this. And what's even more amazing is that they're a nonprofit organization that then actually relied on serum cortisol concentration. So they actually did biomarker assessments, right, to establish the relationship between IPV and TBI. Because if we do not have those biomarkers and we're only relying on subjective reporting, the funding sources tend to be low. But when you have an organization such as this coming and saying, we have serological biomarkers to basically establish that all these women who are here and are part of our shelter and are part of our non-for-profit organization, there are biological markers and objective assessments to basically tell you that, yes, they have experienced TBI. So I think coming from an African context is also really powerful, which is telling us that this type of research can be done in low resource settings. And the forensic anthropological study was really powerful. And in this case, what they wrote was that the pathology report indicated the deceased had suffered massive repeated trauma during her lifetime. So similar to the pastor wife whose video I showed in the beginning. She also had a partly healed rib. The abuse continued until shortly before her death. So this is why I'm saying, if we're seeing this, it's an injustice. She ultimately succumbed after suffering trauma to her head and her face, and for a very long period of extreme and repeated trauma. All of these were apparently not reported or noticed by family members, suspicious, right? Or the medical fraternity. So there's a context. There's a giant box around all of this. What is the context around which individuals are experiencing this trauma? And who's ultimately responsible for standing up for that individual? What policies do we have to have in place to protect women and to protect the girl child? So in conclusion, one of the take-home messages for me was that IPV is clinical and not just cultural. And I needed to emphasize this in the African setting because usually we just say, it's a cultural thing. But once we start moving to clinical assessments, once we start bringing biomarkers in there, right? Once we start saying we are a non-for-profit organization, but we have cortisol levels, we have all these other biomarkers to basically tell you that, yes, these individuals have been experiencing TBI for a long time, and we need funding and we need a way to protect them. If we don't do that, right, we will perpetuate, and we are all sort of contributing to the violence. And IPV needs to be viewed across the continent, and we need to normalize IPV screening, diagnosis, and treatment rather than having this hands-off approach of, I never saw it. And there are opportunities to do that. Actually, I believe there are several medical intervention points that this can be incorporated. So in Ghana and across many countries, emergency medicine services are just growing. They're just beginning to be developed. So in the emergency room, which is where many of us go to seek care when we experience any kind of trauma, we can sort of intersect, right, IPV and TBI screening, diagnosis in the curriculum so that we don't just say, it's cultural or, it's a woman problem. No, it's a clinical problem. And there are many opportunities at the undergraduate level, the residency level, the fellowship level, the clinician level, the attending level, the researcher level, the policy level to sort of intersect ourselves to say, let's do something about this beyond just cultural and subjective reporting. And what can we do? And so I love that I had put the slide in there in 2022 because it's wonderful to now speak to all of you about this. So the ENIGMA IPV working group, which is now hosting this incredible conference, and it's allowing me to speak on this topic. And I would love to be able to collaborate with you all on some global opportunities. The NIH now has the research call for women, and it actually extends beyond the United States, right? The White House initiative for really prioritizing women's health research. And we're also doing some really fascinating work in involving men, actually, like male midwives and male providers as sort of the intervention, right? When a woman goes to see, during pregnancy, women attend antenatal clinic at least 3 times, right? During a 9-month period, at least 3 times during a 9-month period. So are there opportunities there to screen these women to say, you know, what is going on? Are you experiencing IPV? And what is the intersection between IPV and TBI? So we can not only protect the woman, but we also protect the unborn child as well. I just visited Nairobi, Kenya in 2024, and everywhere that I looked, in just this August, there were signs everywhere for gender-based violence. There was a gender-based violence clinic from one of the biggest hospitals in Nairobi all the way to the rural parts of the country. It was incredible. And I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, like what is happening? There was just so much, and it was amazing, amazing, amazing. So I started speaking to my colleagues to better understand the culture. And in Kenya, they believe that every human has rights, regardless of what you do. If you are a sex worker or if you are not, if you are a professor, your life matters. So sex workers, I don't know if this has been spoken about, but sex workers are highly vulnerable and highly targeted in the United States as well. And they tend to experience IPV and TBI, although it's under-researched, at a higher rate than the quote-unquote, average non-sex worker population, right? The prevalence of IPV and TBI in that population, of the few studies that have been done, range from about 50% to 75%. And in the non-sex worker population, the prevalence is hovering around 10 to 15%, okay? And what's amazing is that these sex workers in Kenya are sex workers by night, but during the day, they are paralegals, they are farmers, and they bond together. And one of the paralegals, they have binders and binders and binders of other sex workers who have actually had to endure TBI as well as IPV, actually more IPV, gender-based violence, at the hands of their clients, at the hands of religious leaders who deem themselves as the authority to tell women what to do. And they have an entire process. So on the right here is just an outline of the process that these sex workers turned paralegal during the day do. So there's a cascade of events that happens. A sex worker will report to the SWAP sex worker, I think operations procedures ambassadors, and they'll say, listen, I just experienced this. And literally they go through this process. They will text message the person. They will do a physical assessment. They'll include the crisis team. They will do referrals for the woman who has experienced TBI due to IPV. And then they will involve law enforcement. And what I loved was then they will bring the person to justice. They go to courts. They find whoever did that to that sex worker, which is incredible. And then they ensure that either that person is incarcerated or they pay out or they pay for the medical expenses. But they literally do everything in their power. And what's incredible is that since the victim then is out of work, right? Like because she now can't see, there are blood clots in her eyes, what have you. All those sex workers come together and they actually create a fund. So in the United States, it would be a GoFundMe account. These sex workers come together and they put aside a little bit of their money that they got to help their sister who has experienced this until the court proceedings finish or until that individual has recovered. And as we know, law enforcement is a big part of it. And so they have networks where they literally align themselves with the police. They educate the police on what they do so that sex work is decriminalized. It was one of the most fascinating things I had ever seen in my life. It was incredible. And like I said, I welcome you all to peruse the article that we published, this exact paper, which I told the story of for you in honor of Pastor Osinachi. And I really look forward to potential collaborators on this topic and to exploring this topic beyond the United States in the context that is deemed a low resource setting. But we know that intersection of IPV and TBI does happen in this context. And if nothing at all, is grossly underreported. And we need to support these women as well. So thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to your comments and your feedback.
Martina, thank you so much. Hold on, got an issue here with my video. Carrie, can you take over from that?
Is it me?
Hi, sorry, Lisa, just a heads up. I see you twice in the session. So you might want to mute one of them. But Martina, that was an incredible talk. And please reach out. I mean, I'd be so honored if you came and gave us some true perspective in ENIGMA for the global components of this. I would be so profoundly grateful. So please, let's chat. I see Lisa's camera's back on. I'm not sure if she wants to jump back in.
I think I will still be double.
Got it. Okay, so we do have some questions in the Q&A. So I will read it. One's from Sam. He says, have those who screened for PTSD, I think this is for you. Yes. PTSD is an outcome considered using the ICD-11 ITQ to assess for PTSD versus complex PTSD?
PTSD was not something,
I don't think, yeah.
Yeah, we were not really focused on PTSD as an outcome in these analyses. I mean, it was just a literature review. And for us, I mean, PTSD is an important outcome in relation to, of course, IPV and TBI. But to tell you the truth, if we start focusing on PTSD in this context and in this research, it's going to dilute the story, right? We want to emphasize that IPV and TBI are the case here, the issues here.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, that's my bad because I didn't look at the actual timestamp and that was from the last talk.
No problem. I'm glad I was able to speak to it though.
I know, right? So great work. So I have a question for you. How do we help? Like, how do we get involved in this research in a way that's like not westernized and actually, you know, providing input from more culturally sensitive component?
You know, the first thing that I will say is that we are more similar than we are different in this world, right? And so I know that there are some political contexts that may have us think that we need to sit in our place, you know, mind our business. But I think we are each other's keeper. And if we do not, as we know, the NIH even has programs which are supposed to build up research resources in the global south. So I think it's important that we all bring our expertise to the table and just talk about what can we do. I'll be more than happy to discuss and bring my global partners and just, you know, understand from their perspective what they need, because going to Kenya and coming back with so many collaborators, from the sex worker to academics, and to people who are NIH funded and leading this work, what is really usually often missing are the biomarkers, the biomarker assessments, to basically say, this is a clinical problem, not just a cultural problem. I really want to keep on emphasizing that, because I think when it comes to women, as we know, you know, our symptoms are always swept under the rug, right? And so we need to keep on emphasizing that. But I love, even though I'm an epidemiologist and I do quantitative research, I love the qualitative aspects of this. So we will have to include a sociological, anthropological lens when we do this, because we need to, of course, as you alluded to, touch on the cultural aspect. So I'll be reaching out to you, Carrie. It would be amazing to work together on this.
For sure. And I know there's some people on this call right now who are specifically doing the biomarker work in blood-based and fluid-based biomarkers and one is giving a talk in about an hour, who I think you'd be an incredible collaboration moving forward on this, because I've been harping, biomarkers are really going to be key. So really glad that you brought that up. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions, but do you have any last moments that you want to share with everybody thinking about this space and moving it forward before I move everybody to a break?
I just want to say, I mean, first and foremost, it was almost foreshadowing. Like I mentioned, we had ENIGMA in our presentation, we had ENIGMA in the publication, and I'm so glad to be able to present on this topic. We are more similar than we are different. And I really want all of us to keep on telling our stories, our survivors, keep on shouting so that we researchers will hear you, and we will have the NIH, because you give us something to stand on, right? Like, I just need to know that I'm working for somebody. And when I know that, it really motivates me to keep on working. So please keep on telling the stories, and do contact me. My email is in the inbox there. Contact me, and let's keep on trying to find funding and working together to tell stories from a global lens.
And I just really have to say that I just love that we're more similar than we are different. And I think that that is just a beautiful thing to move forward with.
Absolutely. Thank you, Catherine, as well. Pink Concussion, appreciate you.
And we were both at Pink 2016.
No idea. That's amazing.
Yeah.
The world is small. The world is small.
I was a very petrified trainee at that time. So
me too.
Look how far we've all come.
Love it. Love it.
Perfect. Sorry, Lisa, do you have anything else you want to add in? No, okay. I want to make sure. Okay, with that, I'm gonna send people to break, but a couple things. I just, I want to make sure that we are high-fiving, congratulating our trainees. Like, I don't know about all of you, but watching all of these trainee talks today, we're in a good place. This research is like, you trainees are going to be taking the reins of this and moving this field so forward with different perspectives. And it's so cool to see. So to all the trainees who, this is probably a very daunting and an intimidating space to get up here and share your slides, to share your work. You did amazing, and we're all so proud of you. So thank you for sharing your work. Everybody else, I want to remind you that we will have breakout sessions again at the end of the day at 5:15 Eastern time. And I'm not even going to try to switch into different time zones right now because my brain is mush. But 5:15, we will have breakout sessions. It's a separate Zoom link in the email that you got from Ella. We will have speakers, so you can come hang out with the speakers from today in a room. We'll have the early career researchers or trainees room, so the early career researchers can come and hang out. And we'll have a room for ENIGMA. So if you want to come talk about getting involved in this global collaborative research, come hang out in that room. Again, that's at 5:15 Eastern time. Ella just put the link in the chat. Love to see you all there. And of course, the speakers will be there to answer any of your questions. And we've got trainees in the room. So come hang out with us if you want. If not, you're done, because this would have been 16 hours of amazing information. Totally get that as well. But with that, again, thank you, Martina. Thank you so far to all of our speakers. And we will be back at, gonna check the time. We will be back at 2:30, so in 10 minutes. So thank you all so much.